Imagine you're sitting around the dinner table on Christmas Day, and your uncle just bankrupted your grandmother by landing on boardwalk with 3 hotels. She flips the board. Everyone's screaming. Your cousin storms off saying they'll never play again. And somewhere, the ghost of the woman who invented this game is laughing her ass off, because this is exactly what she wanted. Here's the thing. Monopoly wasn't created to celebrate capitalism. It was created to destroy it. And the story of how a feminist activist's anti-landlord propaganda game became the world's most beloved capitalist fantasy is one of the greatest intellectual heists in American history. Buckle up, because this gets wild. Let's start in the late 1800s. The year is 1866, and Elizabeth Maggie, or Lizzie, as she preferred, is born into a world that absolutely does not want women to have opinions. Too bad for everyone, because Lizzie had a lot of opinions. While most women her age were being pressured into marriage and domestic life, Lizzie was out here doing whatever the hell she wanted. She worked as a stenographer. She wrote poetry. She performed stand-up comedy on stage. Actual stand-up comedy in the 1,890 seconds as a woman, which is genuinely insane. And she was a political activist who taught night classes about economic theory. But here's my favorite Lizzie Maggie fact. In her 20s, frustrated by the absolute garbage wages women received, she took out an advertisement in a major magazine describing herself as a young woman American slave and offered herself for sale to the highest bidding suitor. The ad caused a national scandal. When reporters came to interview her, she basically said, "Oh, you're upset about me pretending to sell myself? Well, where's your outrage about the actual economic slavery women face every day?" Absolute legend behavior. Lizzie didn't get married until she was 44 years old, completely unheard of for that era, and never had children. Instead, she filed multiple patents, including one for a mechanical device that improved typewriters. At a time when less than 1% of patents were filed by women, Lizzie was out here inventing shit left and right. But her greatest invention? A board game. And it was designed to radicalize you. To understand why Lizzie created her game, we need to talk about a man named Henry George, arguably one of the most influential economists you've never heard of. George published a book in 1879 called Progress and Poverty, and it absolutely exploded. We're talking millions of copies sold worldwide. It was one of the best-selling books of the entire 19th century. For context, this economics textbook was outselling most novels. His argument was simple but radical. People should own 100% of what they create through their own labor. But land which nobody created should belong equally to everyone. Think about it. You didn't create land. Jeff Bezos didn't create land. Nobody made the dirt. It just exists. So why should some people get to own it and charge others to use it? George argued that landlords were essentially parasites, extracting wealth from society without producing anything themselves. George proposed what he called the single tax, a land value tax that would tax away the unearned income that comes from simply owning land, while eliminating all other taxes. No income tax, no sales tax, nothing. Just tax the value of land itself. This idea resonated with everyone. Socialists loved it, libertarians loved it, labor unions loved it. In 1886, Henry George ran for mayor of New York City and came in second place ahead of Theodore freaking Roosevelt. Many historians believe he actually won, but the election was stolen through fraud. The movement George inspired was called Georgism, and Lizzie Maggie was a true believer. She saw the misery around her poverty existing alongside massive wealth, landlords getting rich while tenants struggled, and thought, how do I make people understand this? Her answer: make it a game. Between 1902 and 1903, Lizzie designed a board game she called the Landlord's Game. She filed the patent in 1903, and it was granted in 1904 as U.S. Patent 748-626. Look at the original patent, and you'll see it's clearly monopoly. There's the square board. There's go to jail. There are railroad spaces. There's even a space labeled public park that would later become free parking. The similarities aren't subtle, they're identical. But here's the genius part. Lizzie designed the game with 2 sets of rules. The first set, which she called Monopoly Rules, is the version we all know. You buy properties, charge rent, build houses and hotels, and systematically destroy your opponents until only one person has everything and everyone else has nothing. Fun family entertainment. The second set, which she called Prosperity Rules, was the anti-monopoly version. In this version, everyone benefited when wealth was created. When someone paid rent, the money went into a public treasury that everyone could draw from. There were no monopolies, no crushing defeats, just shared prosperity. Lizzie's stated goal was to show players both systems side by side so they could see which one was morally superior. As her 1,924 patent stated, the object of the game is not only to afford amusement to the players, but to illustrate to them how under the present or prevailing system of land tenure, the landlord has an advantage over other enterprises. Guess which version people preferred? That's right. Crushing your friends and family into bankruptcy was way more fun than cooperation. Shocking, I know. Here's where things get interesting. The Landlord's game started spreading through left-wing intellectual circles in the early 1900s. Economics professors were using it as a teaching tool. College students at Wharton, Harvard, and Columbia were playing it in their dorms. But remember, this was before mass-produced board games were common. So people made their own copies by hand. And when people make their own copies, things change. Players started adding house rules. They changed property names to match their local streets. The Quaker communities in Atlantic City, yes, that Atlantic City created a version with properties named after local landmarks like Park Place and Boardwalk. They also added fixed prices to properties and removed the dice and auction mechanics to make it less chaotic. What's crucial to understand is that the game was spreading as a folk game, from friend to friend, town to town, with no one knowing who originally created it. Lizzie's name wasn't on these homemade boards. Her political message was getting lost. And most importantly, nobody was giving her credit or paying her a dime. The game that was supposed to show how landlords exploit people was becoming just a fun game about exploiting people. The irony is so thick you could build a hotel on it. Now we arrive at 1,932, and Charles Darrow, an unemployed heater salesman who was struggling during the Great Depression. Darrow gets invited to a dinner party where his friends Charles and Esther Todd teach him how to play a homemade version of the game. Darrow has such a good time that the Todds type up the rules and send them to him. So Darrow does what any reasonable person would do. He makes his own copy on a circular piece of oilcloth, hires a graphic artist to design some icons, including the now famous Go arrow, and then claims he invented the entire thing. Let me repeat that. Charles Darrow did not invent Monopoly. He learned it at a dinner party, made some aesthetic changes, and then lied about creating it. In 1934, Darrow tries to sell his game to Parker Brothers. They reject it, saying it's too complicated and has 52 fundamental flaws. So, Darrow starts producing copies himself and sells them to a Philadelphia department store. When sales hit 5,000 copies, Parker Brothers changes their mind and buys the rights from Darrow in 1935. Parker Brothers gives Darrow a deal with royalties. He becomes the first millionaire game designer in history. His face appears in magazines. He's credited as the inventor in the game's instructions for decades. The story of the unemployed man who invented a game during the Depression becomes American folklore. There's just one problem. It's complete bullshit. Here's what happened behind the scenes. After Parker Brothers bought Darrow's game, they discovered, oops, that similar games already existed. And there were patents. Specifically, Lizzie Maggie's patents. So in 1935, George Parker himself visits Lizzie Maggie Phillips. She had married in 1910 and offers to buy her patent. But not because he wants to give her credit. He wants to eliminate any legal threat to their new cash cow. Parker Brothers was simultaneously buying up the rights to similar games like Finance, Easy Money, and Inflation, anything that could compete with Monopoly. It was, ironically, the company acting like a monopolist to protect their game about monopolists. The deal they offered Lizzie? $500? No royalties. For context, that's equivalent to about $11,000 today. Charles Darrow, the man who stole her game, became a millionaire. Lizzie Maggie got paid roughly the price of a used car. Parker Brothers did technically publish a small run of the Landlord's game to fulfill their promise to Lizzie, but they put zero marketing behind it. They also agreed to publish 2 other games she designed, Kingsmen and Bargain Day, but both went nowhere. Meanwhile, Monopoly became a global phenomenon. But Lizzie wasn't going down without a fight. In 1936, she contacted both the Washington Post and the Washington Evening Star to tell her story. She showed them her original game boards. The Evening Star noted that, "You might notice little difference in the 1904 version and the one you tried to buy this week." It didn't matter. The myth of Charles Darrow had already taken root. The game's instructions would credit Darrow as the sole inventor for over 40 years. Lizzie Maggie died in 1948, largely forgotten. Her contribution to one of the most popular games in history had been erased. The truth about Monopoly's origins remained buried until the 1,970 and it took a lawsuit to uncover it. Enter Ralph Anspach, an economics professor who created a game called Anti-Monopoly in 1973. The game was designed to teach about trust busting and breaking up monopolies, you know. the actual anti-monopoly stuff. Parker Brothers sued him immediately for trademark infringement. But while researching his legal defense, Anspach became a board game detective. He started tracking down people who had played earlier versions of the game. He found old homemade boards in attics. He uncovered Elizabeth Maggie's original patents. What Anspach discovered was that Parker Brothers' claim to the Monopoly trademark was built on a lie. If Charles Darrow didn't actually invent the game, and he demonstrably did not, then Parker Brothers' trademark might be invalid. The legal battle lasted for years, but Anspach's research finally brought Elizabeth Maggie's story to light. By the 1980 seconds, journalists like Mary Pylon began investigating further, and Lizzie's story started reaching mainstream audiences. But by then, most people had already internalized the Darrow myth. Monopoly had spent 4 decades with game instructions crediting a man who didn't invent it. You literally cannot write a better metaphor for how capitalism works. A woman created something brilliant to critique the system. A man took credit for it and got rich. A corporation erased her contribution and made billions. And now, every Christmas, families around the world scream at each other while playing a game that was originally designed to show them why capitalism is broken. Elizabeth Maggie's greatest achievement wasn't creating Monopoly. It was creating a game so effective at demonstrating how capitalism corrupts everything that capitalism even corrupted the game itself. The lesson here isn't complicated. Be suspicious of who gets credit for things. Behind every great man narrative, there's usually someone who actually did the work. In this case, it was a woman who never got her due during her lifetime. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and now go forth and radicalize your family game night.